Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy, and I was tired the other day when we came back from the march there.
The protest.
Yeah, the protest. We also went to a conservative conference here, I guess you would call it.
It's like the equivalent of CPAC, but there were some issues with the organizers of CPAC and the organizer here in Mexico, so he made a different one. So we went to that one as well.
Well, I guess we'll talk about all that today and more. I don't know if anybody's going to like my opinions. Some of my opinions, I think, may upset the viewers, but we'll get into it. Let's start with the Pope.
So from Ollie London, if you don't follow him, follow him. Pope Leo XIV set to have dinner with 5 transgender activists. He already had this dinner at the Vatican. The Pope dined with activists as part of a group dinner for the Church's Jubilee of the Poor event. Trans activist Alessia Nobile has revealed that he and other transgender activists were invited to the dinner after he formally requested an audience with the new Pope after growing concerns the Church may turn back on LGBTQ rights following the passing of Pope Francis.
Well, also, I had grabbed this on Saturday. Now he's had the dinner with them. So he didn't go as far as I thought he was going to go, which was have a full audience with them. But he did invite them there. They did have their own table, I guess.
Yes. So this is what happened. Chicago-born Pope Leo snubs group of trans women, during Holy Dinner at the Vatican. Chicago-born Pope Leo, I don't know why they keep saying that, appeared to give the cold shoulder to a group of 48 transgender women who were excluded from his head table at the Vatican's annual lunch for the poor on Sunday at the Vatican.
Well, his appointment is actually very political. The reason they keep saying Chicago is they want people to know this is an American-born Pope. They're going after American Catholics with this particular Pope. They want him to kind of create a schism between Catholics and Trump, I believe. But let's continue to go here.
And this is from the Daily Mail. Their seating away from the Pope marked a break from the access they enjoyed under Pope Francis in recent years, and a moment many attendees interpreted as an unmistakable snub, but they were still invited. So what does that mean? The men who had twice been welcomed to Francis's own table in both 2023 and 2024 were instead seated at separate tables throughout the Paul VI hall.
Yeah, and you're not always going to have the same people at your same table. You're going to want to network and get people around. So the fact that they weren't invited.
But this was a dinner for the poor event. So it was mostly people from religious charities, etc., that get to seat with Pope Francis at the table.
What I'm talking about is the last 2 years at this event, they were invited and they had that dinner. So you're not going to have the same people at the same table every year. If you do, it's going to look kind of strange.
It's a really long table.
Yeah.
So it saw them lose prominent place that they held and had become a symbol of Pope Francis's high-profile outreach to transgender Catholics. And here we see it is a long table where people from all walks of life get to sit and talk with the Pope. And this time, I mean, they were still invited, so that does mean something.
Well, there was a ton of heat on the last Pope. I think this Pope realizes that, so he's not going to be a traditionalist because he was placed there by the last Pope. At least that's what it looks like when they had the voting for this particular Pope. That being said, I think he's trying to walk a fine line because he knows if he doesn't have at least some traditional values here and he goes too far left, a lot of people will walk away from the church. Orthodoxy is taking a lot of disenfranchised Catholics in at the moment.
So the widely watched gathering inside the Vatican's sprawling Paul VI hall is attended by more than 1,300 migrants, homeless visitors, disabled guests, and low-income families. The lunch was meant to serve as a continuation of Pope Francis's high-profile outreach to marginalized LGBTQ Catholics. The trans women, men, many of them from Latin Americans from Torrevieja, just outside of Rome, had been personally greeted by Francis at papal audiences and seated at the head table in previous years and found themselves clustered somewhere else.
Okay, also this makes a lot more sense now when it's in the context of migrants, and this is the first year that Trump was actually in office and he is actually taking on illegal immigration. If he would have had this dinner for migrants plus have transgender at his table, I think it would have definitely upset a lot of conservatives more than it does if it's just a migrant event. That being said, they were still there, so I don't know how much he actually did distance themselves from him. Like you did say, that was a good point.
And it says, we weren't able to meet the Pope, said the acknowledged Reverend Andrea Conocchia, the liberal priest who ministers to Torrevieja trans community, but they still had us sit at tables very, very close to the Pope. He insisted the atmosphere went well and he called it fraternal and joyful. And in an interview with the Washington Post, Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, the Vatican longtime organizer of the Pope's charity events, insisted that no slight was intended. So it does seem like they are still trying to pander to and to, make it seem like they're all good, all okay with the trans community.
Yeah, well, I think people know how I feel about the Catholic Church, and I think even though I'm not overly religious, a lot of people would agree with me. There's currently a schism going on inside the church. The hierarchy of the church with these extreme liberal values and these globalist values that are really trying to create a one world religion, a one world government. At least that's the direction that the elites in the Catholic Church are kind of headed to. I think the base and the Catholics around the world really see things a lot different, and they were very disappointed in the last pope. And as far as this pope goes, I think people are giving him a chance, but I think he's in the same vein as the last pope.
And speaking of that schism, here in Mexico, it was interesting to see at that other conservative event we did go to see a lot of mentions, mostly just focusing around faith and religion and not talking too much even about politics. And here in Mexico, still conservatism continues to only mean basically traditional values, faith, religion, and Catholicism. That's all it means. It was also good to see that some cardinals came out to speak out, Mexican cardinals came out to speak out about the protests and, saying that God is walking with the people, to denounce the corruption in the government, etc. But still that interlinkedness and the way I think a lot of conservatives here in Mexico view conservatism is doing it a disservice in terms of trying to attract more people to come in and to join with different ideas as well of how to do things. That is one criticism we gave about Eduardo Verástegui a year ago, and then we gave it again this past Sunday.
Well, it's very interesting because on the ground, a lot of Catholics, especially here in Mexico, even America as well, a lot of Catholic countries, the base is going very, very traditional, and it's going the opposite way of the hierarchy of the church. And eventually there's going to be a major schism there, I would think, because the ideology of the elites in the church are just completely opposite of what the base is and what the grassroots effort actually is. A lot of Catholics don't give much weight to what the Pope says anymore. They're just waiting on a traditional Pope to kind of get into office.
But then in that case, are they still Catholics? And we talked about this with the whole Nick Fuentes thing and the base camp episode that went into Nick Fuentes and Catholicism within the United States. Does it still count to be, are you still counted as Catholic if you're not listening to the word coming from the Vatican, or if you're upset with the word coming from the Vatican and not doing, something about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you're seeing Orthodoxy kind of trying to capitalize on this. A lot of people think if you believe in the Bible, that's enough. If the Catholic Church or the hierarchy of the Catholic Church keeps going that liberal globalism, one world direction, I think they're only going to do themselves a disservice, and they're going to have another schism. There's been multiple schisms throughout their history where large groups of followers have broken off from the Catholic Church, and the hierarchy is really headed in the wrong direction. I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not afraid to say this, but I mean, a lot of Catholics is a touchy subject. And what I would also say about you're seeing this rise of Christian nationalism, and you have to be very careful because I think a lot of this idea of Christian nationalism is coming from a grassroots effort, but the people or the church they're actually following is extremely globalist and left-leaning.
Multiple of these churches. It's not just the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
It is also a lot of Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Lutheran. All of them seem to be turning or seem to be starting to get or have been infected for a long time with this, and now it's growing from within as well.
But I would maybe disagree with you on orthodoxy isn't, but the problem now that I'm seeing with orthodoxy is you're seeing a big rise of Christian nationalism from Catholics and Orthodox. The problem is you can kind of look at when a church takes on a hierarchy style role rather than a decentral grassroots style role. If you do capture the hierarchy of the church, you kind of capture the ideology, and that's what happened to Catholicism, and it could definitely happen to Orthodoxy as well, even though it's a little bit more decentralized. There is still a major hierarchy within the Orthodox Church. And
it can be good or it can be bad. And we've seen examples historically of it being both good and bad to have that hierarchy, and what happens when you lose it and you put man at the center of everything. But exactly because of that hierarchy and the people not being okay with it or starting to notice the fractures within it, that is how we got a lot of the revolutions, the French Revolution, and also the Enlightenment period all came kind of based out of that idea and that notion that there shouldn't be a hierarchical system of that style. But now we see the consequences also of the Enlightenment and what happened after that as well, when you removed faith in God completely from the society.
Well, I think faith in God is extremely important, especially in the day and age we're kind of living in. You need a moral foundation that doesn't allow the government to kind of go off the rails and have their own sense of morality that's constantly moving. That being said, I think
dictating what morals are and dictating from the government what the morals and values are of the people. That should not be the government's role. And that is what they want to do now, especially Democrats and very left-leaning progressives.
Well, when we're looking especially at the hierarchy of the Catholic Church in the last election of the Pope, I don't think there's really hope of getting the conclave. There's no real hope of getting a traditional Pope. There's too many liberalized, globalized cardinals that have been captured. If there's going to be a change in the church, it's going to come from the grassroots. And if it comes from the grassroots, the elites within the church are just too captured. I think there's more likely to be a schism than a change in the upper echelon of the church itself.
And Rafa says, hello. And he says Pope Leon should send them to the shrink instead. Or, somewhere far, far away where they don't disturb people.
He shouldn't have brought him to the dinner in the first place. But that being said, yeah.
And Rafa also says, today I saw both a good and a bad take from Trump. And first he says good. He mentioned that everyone should interview whoever they like, speaking about Nick Fuentes, and then Rafa didn't tell us what his bad take was. But we will talk quite a bit about Trump and the release of certain emails and certain things that are interesting, at least, and that are continuing to drive a schism within the Conservative Party, but also now giving fodder to the Democrats as well.
Well, and we will be talking about Bubba. So if you don't know who Bubba is, you're going to want to definitely watch the rest of the episode, because there was some emails released in this Epstein file release that were a little bit shocking. Okay, do you want to move to the next story, though?
Yes, let me just really quickly find something before we talk a little bit about something else, about the Pope or something.
Okay. And we got this, who is Thomas Crooks? So Thomas Crooks was the shooter in the first Trump deletion attempt, but I didn't know the article that you had for that, actually.
Oh, I don't have any article for that.
Then why it's on the list, though?
No.
Oh, I went to the wrong day.
Yes,
I'm on Friday. We were talking
about what
about
I was going to talk about, and I said, speaking of Trump, is that over this past weekend, and we went to it, there was a big protest here in Mexico City and a bunch of other Mexican states against the current government, the corruption, the cartels, and the ineffectiveness of our government and all our governments in handling the cartel and the organized crime situation that we have in our country. So first, that we did speak about it. There was a whole live where we had just come back this past Saturday.
We were extremely tired at that time. So yeah,
we did the live on Saturday. You can see our opinions, like a raw opinion there. But
I think my raw opinion was bang on, and I'm going to stick with that same opinion. Although it's becoming a little bit more evident who may have coordinated this, but we'll have to see over the next 30 days.
And that is what we're going to be talking about now. I just wanted to give context as to the next clip we're going to play about Trump. So thousands did protest against the government in Mexico as clashes leave 120 injured and or more. Some people have been arrested, people from Generation Z or Gen Z. The protest was originally sparked by Gen Z or young people or a group that called themselves Gen Z. And the government has been denying a bunch of different things here in Mexico about the protest, both before and now after that it has happened. But Trump has spoken about it as well. So we'll see that. But just quickly as context, at least 120 people, 100 of them police officers have been injured in clashes. More civilians were also injured. They're just not counting them. In clashes during anti-government protests in Mexico City, the police said that. Thousands of demonstrators marched in the Mexican capital on Saturday to protest against violent crime and President Claudia Sheinbaum's government.
Okay, they got 120 officers injured. This would be the perfect opportunity, and any other government around the world would take this opportunity to start implementing censorship laws online and really cracking down on their political opponents. I would expect to see this from Claudia Sheinbaum in the next 30 days. If that happens, then you're going to definitely have strings attached to Claudia Sheinbaum and the violence that was happened there, as maybe she coordinated. If she doesn't start implementing censorship laws and going after her political opponents. I'm much more inclined to say it was the U.S.
So we're getting there, but just let me finish giving the context of what the marches were, because a lot of people might not even know. Shaymam said the marches, which also took place in other cities, had been funded by right-wing politicians who opposed her government, and she continues down this line of, it is the conservatives, it is the right, which in Mexico, and I continue to say, is essentially non-existent.
I'll somewhat disagree with you here, and I'm just going to throw it in there. Not that I'm necessarily, I don't like the fact that she's saying it's the right wing.
Well, no, nobody does.
But
that's what I'm saying.
But some people do. But I will say this, she can't say who it really is if she suspects it is the U.S. and the U.S. is trying to create a color revolution, which they've done dozens of times over the last 20 years. Most recently, they did it in Ukraine. It looks like they're trying to do something similar in Venezuela. So they do have a history of this. She can't point at the American administration and accuse them of anything because she's involved in a very high stakes tariff negotiation that will really dictate the future of Mexico. Canada made the mistake of pointing and making accusations at the U.S., and it really hindered their talks when it came to tariff negotiations. So I think she's using right wing as because she can't say the American administration, basically.
And she has highlighted, pointed at, and talked about both industry leaders and others, like political commentators, influencers, as they call them, that are international. And she has given that lens. However, she is pointing more towards South America and Spain, because that's where the people come from. However, I'm going to continue. The rally was organized by Gen Z youth groups, drawing support from citizens protesting against high-profile endings, including the assassination just a few weeks ago of Uruapan Mayor Carlos Manso. But as you are mentioning, and curiously, right before we started the show, Trump did give comments about the protest.
Well, before we get into this, I'll keep going because you're saying she's calling out South American influencers, but I think more so this goes to
and local ones.
This goes to the point that she's staying away from pointing the finger at the U.S. because it was a absolute slew of American commentators that are very famous talking about this all day today, all day yesterday, and she did not point at any of those people, and she's not pointing at the American administration, even though there's a lot of evidence it may have came from the American administration.
That's what I was getting at.
So, but what I'm saying is, you're saying she's pointing at South American.
That's what she's doing. That's what she's using as, some distraction technique to point at certain people and certain very right-wing conservative people
she can't point
outside
at the
of
US.
Mexico, because she can't point to the U.S. Now, during the protest, a lot of the violence that was sparked by groups that were very clearly not with the march, at least the march that we saw and that we attended. Most people that we saw were wearing white. They were pretty peaceful. They were chanting, "Go away, lemon tits," that's what they call her, and a bunch of other slogans and chants and support for Carlos Manso, who's the mayor that was assassinated. However, then once the march arrived in front of what is the Mexican White House, called the Palacio Nacional, in the city center and that giant square, that is when a lot of the clashes began, both from police starting to react preemptively, and apparently there's some indications that they sprayed pepper spray and anti-riot smoke before most people got into the thing, so they were coughing as they came in. But then this group of, it looks like Black Bloc, but who knows if they're actually Antifa or who they associate with or who pays them to be there, were the ones that started the confrontations initially with the police and the more violent acts of tearing down the barricades.
Well, I would also I also want to give the other narrative, because the narrative that's kind of emerging from there is this was a massive protest that ended in violence, and that's not the case. Protests here in Mexico City get very, very, very big. We've been to quite a few. This was one of the more smaller protests.
You still think it was small? I think from the aerial shots,
you compare it to other cities, yeah, it was big. But from here in Mexico City, it was very small. I know you've seen
aerial shots.
I know you've seen drone footage, but what I'm saying is we were on the ground. It wasn't tightly compact. It wasn't that long. It wasn't even half as big as the feminist march that we went to. So also what I'm saying is all the people that we marched with, it wasn't the people that ended up at the end in this violent confrontation. And we even seen with the feminist march as well, people marched the whole thing and then did not stay in the center. So it almost seemed like it was definitely organized from either the Sheinbaum administration or the U.S. That would be my inkling. It wasn't the protesters that were marching that created violence. It seemed like it was a coordinated effort from somebody else. And
that at least instigated the violence. And if it is coming from the Sheinbaum administration, it is to delegitimize the marching and be able to point and say, these people are violent,
I
don't
disagree.
listen to them. Hold on, I'm getting there. If Sheinbaum was the one, or the government, or Morena, or whoever within the government was behind the instigators and the people that torn down barricades to prove that the people organizing it were violent and that it's a non-legitimate protest and that the police had to react, etc., that's one scenario.
No,
the U.S.
that's
scenario.
that's not the scenario.
Okay, then what's the scenario?
The scenario is if Sheinbaum did it, you're not just doing it to delegitimize the protest. You're doing it to actually implement censorship laws. This is literally happened.
That's what I was
Hold on,
saying.
this happened on January 6th. This happened all over Europe. They try to do the same thing in Canada
But
as
that
well
is
as
what
the UK.
delegitimizing means.
Yeah, but you have to point to the action of when they're going to actually implement laws. If Sheinbaum doesn't implement any laws on the back of this and doesn't implement internet censorship laws and other things of that nature, then that's going to indicate that she's not the one that did this and that it was probably the American administration.
That's what I'm getting at.
But you underplayed what's the context? What are you actually looking for that's actionable that would point at Sheinbaum? And it's the fact if she brings in laws.
And the thing is, with the laws that she might bring in, they are already on the table. That's the thing. So that is pretty much already done.
No,
they
it's
just
not.
have to continue to sign it and put it into
Yeah.
legislation. Yeah,
But
that's what I was going to say.
She has a huge consolidation of power with the judiciary, so it should be very easy for her right now.
And within both houses.
Yeah, to really crack down and really implement laws, implement censorship laws online, as well as going after her political opponents like we've seen in the EU and everything else. If she doesn't do that, then it's very much going to look like the Americans.
And with the whole, it might be the Americans thing, what I'm also thinking is during the protest, yes, there were a lot of local reporters and a lot of people that were filming and putting the information out there. However, I also found it interesting that some people that I'm a big fan of, like BG on the Scene or Brendan Good, I can never see his last name, but he's a reporter that is usually at every single, he's covered BLM, he's covered a bunch of protests all over the US, the anti-ICE raids. We've used some of his footage, crediting him, of course, and I am a big fan and he's an inspiration. But it was interesting to see that he was here in Mexico City taking footage of the peaceful march at first, but then, and because he is well versed in the tactics of, heavy protests and riots and what to do, of course he was able to get a lot of other footage, but that is the footage that a lot of other American commentators, especially more conservative MAGA leaning, were able to then grab and, post all over the place to say Mexicans are tired of this. There's this giant protests in Mexico. What does this mean? The president has to go in and do something. Also, Yohan Grillo, I don't know how to say that name, another investigative reporter, also very well versed and equipped with protests, was also here for the protest. So seeing that there are these figures that are usually very good at publicizing events, so most people, and they make it go viral. It was interesting to see that they were here in Mexico City when they usually haven't covered any other protests in Mexico.
Okay, yeah. I didn't go down the rabbit hole that you went here. You proposed this to me the other day, and I said probably not, because there was so much publicity. People knew there was going to be a major protest in Mexico City because
But they didn't know it was going to be that big.
It was leading up for a couple of weeks. So
and they were trying to compare it to Nepal, so I do understand why people would want to come for that. But
so it made
at the beginning, it was very boring.
Keep going. I'll wait till you're done.
I'm done. You're trying to debate with me.
I'm not.
Yes, go on.
You're trying to say that I'm going down the rabbit hole that it very much could have been the U.S.
That's what I'm saying.
No, hold on. I know that's what you're saying, but the way you're trying to connect the dots is through these content creators. What I'm saying is if there wasn't a lot of publicity, that there was going to be a big march in Mexico City and these content creators kind of showed up out of nowhere, how would they know to show up here? But they would have known to show up here because there was actually a ton of publicity leading up to this thing.
Locally, we only got to see that because I was telling you.
No, because I follow a lot of the American content creators I was following were actually talking about the ending of the politician's life. So it was out in American circles as well.
But I think it's still interesting that he was here so quick, and that in general, the international press and the media just got a hold of the violence part of it and not the everything else that happened before that we witnessed and where we interviewed people, etc. There's a video coming out soon about that as well. But
yeah, I mean, it looks like a typical color revolution that the United States might try to make, but it didn't work out so well. There wasn't enough protesters. The gathering wasn't big enough. There wasn't enough violence. That's what it kind of looks like to me. And now there's talk there's going to be another march on Thursday.
That's still very speculative. I have to confirm it. It's just something I saw. So take it with a big grain of salt.
But also what I'm kind of saying is we have to look at the actions of what the Scheinbaum administration is and what the U.S. administration is over the next 30 days. Because one of them is going to reveal their cards on who may have been involved in coordinating the violence in this attack, because both parties have a lot to gain. The Scheinbaum administration can start implementing online censorship, digital IDs, things of this nature. The Trump administration
and continue to strengthen her and her government's power over the people by continuing to point at this is bad, these are the bad people, these are against me, which is what she did today. We'll get into that in a bit.
But if she doesn't take that action, it actually points that she wasn't involved in that. And then that would point to the American administration, because Trump's already coming out with statements which would kind of indicate maybe the Americans were involved in this more than I would have initially thought.
And it gives them a great, excuse to say, see, even the people are revolting. Even the people are trying to go against the government, trying to tear down the walls to the Mexican White House, etc. So it does optically look very good for the U.S. if now they come, and if our other politicians and the Mexican opposition and a lot of content creators are now starting to ask the administration to come do something. Are you seeing what happened on the ground? Trump, please do something. Because I saw so many open letters to Senator Marco Rubio, to Marco Rubio, asking him for action from the states to Mexico and to see the effect that Claudia Sheinbaum is having on the people and how angry the people are with her. So it does look very good for the U.S. administration if they continue to do this.
Well, also I was going to say Venezuela, he's kind of got Venezuela surrounded. If he goes and attacks that country and it's a one-off and he can't connect it to Mexico, it's very hard to sell to his base. The midterms are coming up. I said all along he has to make this a war against the cartels. He has to link the Venezuela conflict that's kind of emerging with Mexico before he actually strikes. Now he's kind of done it today with his most recent statement. Why don't we get into the recent statement, actually?
Yeah, so from Disclosed TV, it says, Trump, I would launch strikes on Mexico to stop substances. That's okay with me. I would do that on land corridors. I would.
And also potentially launching strikes in Mexico or putting American troops or American personnel into Mexico to deal with it.
Would I launch strikes in Mexico to stop drugs? It's okay with me. Whatever we have to do to stop drugs. Mexico is, look, I looked at Mexico City over the weekend. There's some big problems over there. If we had to, would we do there what we've done to the waterways? There's almost no drugs coming into our waterways anymore. Isn't it down like 85%?
It is, sir.
I don't know who the 15% would be. It wouldn't be you.
No, that's for sure.
No, I think it's been,
Tons and tons.
you would say that's a big.
Okay, I guess now it's my turn. So with this, and clearly he is pointing already, and the narrative is already forming, and we see it also with how the media is reporting on it, how both Trump, Rubio, and others, and the people that surround MAGA and that go around MAGA as their content creators and as their commentary people, and just people in general in the US, have pointed at, well, see what's happening in Mexico City, see how upset the people are, we need to do something about it, both to protect our own border, being America, and to help the people of Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. So it is giving a very good narrative context to what they might want to continue to do and give them kind of a open door to come ahead and do it, and for the Mexican people to be thankful for it, because now we're seeing, Trump is saying, see the protests in Mexico City, clearly the people are upset.
Yeah, never mind.
Okay, let's continue to see what he said. Let's see.
Big signal.
Absolutely.
We have almost no drugs coming into our country by the sea, by, the waterways. You know why, okay? I mean, it's pretty obvious. Would I do that on the land corridors? I would. Look, every boat we knock out, we save 25,000 American lives, not to mention the destruction of families. These families are decimated forever. The mother, the father, the children, they never recover really from it. When you lose somebody, like the way they live, if you lose them, but the way they die is horrible.
And again, I think it does provide good cover and more excuses for the US to come into Mexico as they have been wanting to do, as they have been threatening to do.
Well, yeah, sorry, the dog was
Yes, I know.
misbehaving. She's constantly in the bed every time we do a show. What I was going to say about this is we have to be very careful because right now there's kind of shared power amongst Mexican politics. You have the cartels that have a lot of sway and influence. You have the Americans that have a lot of sway and influence, the Chinese as well as the globalists. So if one party consolidates power, whether it's the cartels or whether it's the American administration, they're gonna end up stripping a lot of freedoms from the people themselves.
Even more.
Even more, yeah. So what I would say is right now, there's actually a lot of free speech in Mexico when I'm looking comparatively to other nations like the UK, like the EU, like Canada. Even the Biden administration was really infringing on free speech. As of right now, Mexico does have pretty robust free speech and they're not infringing. If they start to infringe, it's going to be
Coming in and trying to deal with it, not in a coordinated manner with the Mexican, with the Mexican, sorry, I'm trying to get the chat, with the Mexican government as well, because that could form a further coalition between those that are corrupt within the armed forces and within the police and within the National Guard that do cooperate sometimes or mostly with the cartels, and the cartels themselves, if they find a common enemy in the US by the US just barging in. That is why the cooperation is so important, because in that sense, in that case, all of the Mexican people would be the losers, and the help from the US that they were demanding so much would not be welcomed after a few days even.
I think whoever gets control here, it's very important for the Mexican people to kind of speak up and demand their freedoms. Each group's going to want to strip different freedoms from the civilian population, whether it's the Americans bringing in a digital ID, really tracking people,
Yes.
corporatizing the entire country, or whether it's the cartels stripping freedom of movement and not having the ability to speak up online and stuff like this because threat of violence. But there's
Or the Mexican government itself.
yeah,
doing
or
the same thing.
or the Chinese government, or
Yes.
if even the globalists in the EU, if they come over and start implementing more power,
And
more
helping.
power structure, they're going to want the Mexican people to kind of follow the EU model, which is a ton of censorship. People are getting arrested for memes on a daily basis over there.
And I mean,
So-
Claudia would love that as well, because she clearly looks very affected by what's happening, but she's trying to put up a strong front. I'm going to translate a part of a speech she gave. She does a conference every morning. But first, we have some comments.
1 second. I will say this is a tipping point for Claudia Scheinbaum. I
Should have been.
I kind of give her a lot of praise for so far how she's doing on the tariffs specifically, although I disagree on a lot of her policies. I don't like the fact that she's so left. But if she's the only country that really protects speech laws and doesn't go after the demonstrators and starts bringing online censorship because of what happened over the weekend, I will heap praise on her because every other country would have used this as an opportunity to bring in mass censorship.
But they have, I mean, the police arrested and are going against and are going for and persecuting some of the protesters, at least about 40 something,
Hold
or
on.
15 for sure, that have been imprisoned, and now they have manslaughter or homicide
Yeah, I'm
charges
not worried about
for 10 years
I'm not worried about the people they're going after.
without
I'm
judgment.
not worried about the people they're going after at the protest. I'm worried about
Yes.
the mass population through online censorship. They were at the palace, and windows were being ripped out of the palace. It was getting very violent. So you can have a police presence, and you can press charges on those people. Is the thing.
Yes.
And
However, the judicial process hasn't been followed as it should have. I'm just trying to give the other side of the
Yeah.
coin and what people here in Mexico in the ground are actually saying that are the issues, and then contrasting it with looking at the bigger picture that most people here don't want to look at. Mexicans are very just concerned with what's happening in Mexico and don't want to consider both the influence of the US, China, whatever, and they don't want to look at the way you're looking at
well,
it.
yeah, the whole thing.
That there was violence, be it from the instigators or the protesters themselves. There was violence, but the reaction of the police was not maybe justified in all cases, like when they were hitting people that were just standing there after the violence had started. So both sides were poorly managed.
I'm not a fence sitter, and I'm gonna. So
I'm not sitting on a fence.
that's exactly what you're doing.
Well, no, I'm saying the police did have to go after the ones that were doing the violent acts. However, we also saw videos of women being kicked by police for no reason. They were just standing there.
Yeah, and you don't know the context of the videos. We've seen in the U.S. how these
There's
how
live
they can be
streams.
how
It
they
was
can
a
be
live
pigeonholed.
stream.
You didn't watch the whole live stream because I've been with you for the last 2 days.
No,
so I know
but-
exactly what you've
But
watched.
there is the context of the video. You can go look for it if you
Yeah.
want
Okay. Well, why don't you go into the comments?
it. Okay. Rafa says, hold on. Oh, Rafa says that he did tell us the bad thing Trump said, but YouTube blocked it. Rafa, I am, and I pulled up, and I am reading the comments on RUMBLE as well. So if you want to comment from there, but watch us on YouTube for now, you can do that. I will be reading the RUMBLE comments because of the censorship we continue to have with YouTube with comments. Because in my Spanish live, they're always censoring the comments. Rafa also says, wonder if he plans to strike the arms dealers from his country that are providing weapons to the narco-terrorists. Aren't those individuals, companies, terrorists too?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of these both because we were at the protest, and I mean, these are emotional subjects, so we're getting more into the news than we normally would. But there is a ton of Trump news, which doesn't make him necessarily look the best right now. We're going to kind of get into that as well.
But what is your opinion of the people that sell the weapons to Mexicans all the way from the U.S.? Should they be prosecuted as well?
I think he's cracking down on all sides. I don't think this is like previous administrations, number one, so I will give him credit for that. He's cracking down within the U.S. He wants to come into Mexico, so he's pressuring the Sheinbaum administration with the tariff and possibly with the color revolution if it is connected to them. Plus, he's going to South America with Venezuela and going to other countries down there. So he's really taking a holistic approach to get all sides and all sources of the problem. I think he is cracking down in the country as well.
And Rafael says it's unbearable to comment in this crappy censoring chat. That is why go to RUMBLE. I am reading comments from there as well. And he says, wonder if he plans to strike the tools dealers from his... Oh, then he had to redo it because he thought it got censored. And Rafa also says, I see that the VIP live is on, the RUMBLE live. Do you read comments from there or only when you... Now I am. Today I am because of the censorship we're seeing with YouTube as well in English.
But I will say the next 30 days is going to be very, very, very revealing on what's kind of going on in Mexico, because Sheinbaum is in a place and she's getting pulled from all directions right now. And the one people that really don't have a voice seems to be the Mexican people. It's all these big power players, whether it's cartels, whether it's the American administration, the Chinese, or the globalists. They all want a piece of Mexico because Mexico has a lot of room to grow economically.
And it is a very strategic country to take power and take hold of.
Especially with the ports that AMLO built with the railroad. It's a very, very strategic country
With
right
help
now.
from China.
Yeah.
That was with help from China. So Sidekick on RUMBLE says, so how does she know not to be there? Oh yeah. So Claudia Sheinbaum was not in Mexico City this past weekend when the protests were happening. She was in Tabasco, a different state, doing God knows what.
Well, but let's kind of go into that. It's very revealing. Obviously, the cartels are connected with the Sheinbaum administration.
Yes, that is.
Everybody knows that. But even that being said, if she's not going to start infringing on people's freedoms, free speech, maybe you want shared power with the cartels and other administrations. I know it's not a popular view to have, but however you're going to secure the most freedoms for the Mexican people is kind of what you want. And I think if you consolidate all power with an external force like the U.S. or all the power is with the cartel, it doesn't work out well for the Mexican people. Shared power is sometimes the best. It's worst for
But
whoever.
it'd be better if that shared power was within the checks and balances of a regular government that is supposed to be democratically elected. But of course,
that's not going to happen.
That's not happening.
And it's not going to happen because whoever implements control over this situation is going to want to implement control over the long-term future of Mexico and benefit and profit off of that.
And Sidekick says, sounds like a Bush and 911, just not at that height, no pun intended. And he also says it's a loaded coin either way. And yes, exactly. And that is why it is important too. And I know a lot of people here and commentators and influencers are only going to focus on the march and the protest this week and then completely forget about it because there's new scandals coming up all the time here in Mexico and we have very short-term memory.
Well,
it is very important to see what steps are taken both by the US and the Trump administration and Claudia Sheinbaum and China and the EU and what they say and what international media says, and also the reaction from FIFA for the World Cup that is supposed to happen here as well. And now there's people from Mexico asking FIFA not to come.
Well-
and that is another, pain in Claudia Sheinbaum's butt that
Also,
the World Cup is supposed to happen
like you
here.
said, there's international media, American media, Mexican media. There's leftists, there's rightists. Everybody wants to paint a very specific narrative, is what I'm seeing. What you're hearing from us is we don't know who coordinated it. It does not look like this is organic violence coming from the people of Mexico. It looks like it was a power player that wanted to orchestrate violence, and we're not going to know who that is until somebody kind of makes the moves and reveals their cards over the next 30 days by either trying to implement laws and censorship, if it's Sheinbaum, or it's the Americans really applying pressure to Sheinbaum to allow the American military in.
And if the American military does come in and does help, as a lot of people here in the fake right, I'll call it, or the fake conservatives here, I'll call them, the opposition, they're asking, like Lili Tellez, for the U.S. to come in and do something. However, if the U.S. does come in and they're trying to do the same to their own people, but now there's a big excuse to implement, specifically within Mexico, digital ID and controls and infringe upon people's freedoms to keep them safe, to also keep the U.S. safe. There's like a treasure trove of control that is to be had right now with this situation.
And you're exactly right. If the Americans come in, they're going to demand massive digital ID and strict implementation of that digital ID and a lot of other censorship so they can track the entire population of Mexico so they can coordinate their military, and they're never going to take those freedoms off. That's the big concern about allowing the Americans in here, or even having the Mexican government cooperate with the Americans, because they're the ones that are going to implement this on their own people. There's negatives about the cartel as well. There's negatives any which way you go. Yes. That's why I want to kind of see shared power and maximize freedom for the Mexican people, or people living in Mexico like myself.
Totally, the shared power would be between, again, the checks and balances that are usually within a democratic government,
there is no hope in that.
I know.
That's already a failed system. That's not going to happen here in Mexico.
And our entire political system and the structure of it has bred this corruption, not just with Morena and Claudia Sheinbaum, but since its inception, essentially. The Mexican government has had this issue and has had this play for power, and it doesn't work, but we continue to do the same thing over and over again. Rafa says, the bad thing, Trump wants to import Chinese spies, students. Yes, he said that a while ago as well. But
there's a bunch of negative policies. Trump's really becoming more and more of a corporatist. His base seems to be splitting from him. They're not really splitting. They're trying to push him in the right direction. The problem is he keeps going with Susie Wild, Marco Rubio, and really going more and more towards a corporate base. And and becoming more of a globalist.
And Sidekick, remind me if you are Walker or not. If not, I'm sorry. I'll continue to call you Sidekick. If you're Walker, I'll just say Walker. Sidekick says they're using Mexico as a bridge to their doing so. I agree. I thought this before. The globalists see Mexico as a freebie zone. Yeah.
Well, I think everybody sees this as a freebie zone. The Americans, with Trump's nationalism, sees this as this is their hemisphere of influence. I think the Chinese kind of see, oh, this is an easy area to move on. The globalists are naturally aligned with Sheinbaum ideologically, so they already thought they had Mexico, but now everybody's kind of fighting over it. And then you have the cartels on top of that, and the cartels really throw in a very wild card element, because no country has a cartel as strong as the Mexican cartels, so they can fight off a lot of these power bases coming for Mexico.
Or ally with them.
Or ally with them.
Like with China.
So,
and China saw Mexico, and now that they've moved away from Latin America completely, Mexico was the bridge to enter into Latin America, were the ones that were the connector. And now they're losing ground here in Latin America. So now they're also worried about that. So could they also be planning all this and destabilizing stuff? But let's see Claudia Sheinbaum's, because we've talked enough. Let's see Claudia Sheinbaum's response to the protests. Again, if you want to see footage from that, both that we took and that happened after we had left, go watch our live on Saturday. It's a little rambly, but it's
I
raw.
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I watched
it's raw.
it back.
And we talked a lot.
I was extremely tired that day. We must have walked 10 miles. Then we went to
Under
the
the sun.
conference at night.
Yes, we came back around like 9 and then did a live till about 12. From La Derecha Diario Mexico, if you don't follow them, they have interesting information coming from the right-wing version of news. She says, do you think you're going to weaken the president for as loud as you can shout? I'm more strong now. And let's see what she said. I'm going to try to translate it. as best as possible. I'm sorry if I miss some things or if I go slowly.
¿Creen que nos van a debilitar? ¿Que van a debilitar a la presidenta por lo que gritan? No.
They think they're going to weaken us. They think they're going to weaken the president with how they shout. No.
And wait, let's just think about this. When she's saying they, I think she's really saying the Americans.
Well, no, she meant
but
the
she's
protest.
having to say the right wing.
No, here she's talking about the protests specifically, about the people yelling against her at the protest.
No, but what I'm saying is, never mind. Okay. Even the people at the protest, she knows were sent by somebody, or if it wasn't her herself.
The ones that did destruction, yeah. There were a lot of Mexican citizens just upset with the government there as well.
Más fuerte soy,
We're stronger
más
today.
fuerte.
We're stronger.
¿Ustedes creen que esos gritos, leperadas y me van a hacer algo?
You
No.
think that yelling and those chants are going to do anything to me? No.
Que estamos fuertes con el pueblo.
We're here strong with the people.
Fuertes, muy fuertes.
Strong, very strong.
En Campeche hubieran visto a la gente.
In Campeche,
feliz
you
con
should have seen the
nosotros.
people. They were happy with us.
¿Cómo se llama ahí donde fuimos con las...
What's it called where we went? Tlaxcala. She
Also,
forgot the name of the state.
Also, we can't forget she has very tight ties to China. China has very tight ties to Russia and the BRICS. And the BRICS have been coordinating to all their member states about color revolutions and how they're implemented and preparing to kind of resist those and the responses that you should have. So I'm without a doubt, she had to be prepared for this in a certain way because the protest didn't grow too big. They were actually at a manageable level.
Well, the problem was, and I mean, a lot of people are complaining about this, of why and how the protest didn't get bigger, or a lot of people didn't arrive to the city center, to the Zócalo, where the palace is, because they fenced off and they blocked a lot of the streets as a preventative and preemptive measure. So when people, kind of like us, we almost reached the one street you could enter into towards the palace, but we had to leave. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to leave after that. So we left, and a lot of people did leave because of how blocked off the streets were. That doesn't happen with other protests like the feminist march we went to, etc., where more streets are open and the flow of people is easier to come in and out. It was planned that less people would be able to reach the city center.
And I'll kind of disagree because I do remember the feminist march. Everything was blocked off, and that one specific corner where you turn down to go to the last straightaway before you get to the city center,
in front of
it gets very tight, and that's where a lot of people decided to just turn around. That's where we decided to turn around.
Because we said if we don't leave now, we won't make it to the other event.
Not even that; it's just going to be a headache to try to get in there.
And so what were we saying?
Do you want to go into the next story?
Well, this was the last bit. This is the only thing I found in English that kind of spoke about the Claudia Sheinbaum's response to the protests. But let's just say she's not looking good, at least to the Mexican people and to her own people that she continues to try to defend. And it's only angered more people that she has come out to victimize herself instead of acknowledging that there may be some discontent with her government and the violence. So the Mexican president slams opposition. Mexico's Gen Z movement is turning up the heat on President Claudia Sheinbaum's administration with a little help from her enemies. But again, it is still unclear who was behind the full coordination of it and how much of it was legitimate Mexican citizenry and how much of it was either the US, China, or whoever's interested in getting
But it's very
power.
interesting. All the coverage I've watched at this, nobody's pointing at Sheinbaum or the US possibly being the ones that are actually coordinating the violence. And I think it's very obvious it's one of those two.
And the U.S. never likes to admit within their own commentary, their own people that do commentary, that it might be them. They never want to admit that. So it's not going to come from the U.S. American commentary.
Well, they do, but the problem is that it's the conservatives that typically do it, and the conservatives don't want to go against Trump right now.
Don't want to go against Trump, and it benefits them if they can say we do need to go take action against blah 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 blah. What they've been screaming at Trump about for the past 5 years.
They have to go into Mexico, and they need cooperation with the Mexican government in order to justify Venezuela. The whole thing has to be connected to drug running and cartels. If they can't connect it and they just strike Venezuela, the base is going to really sever from Trump.
And I just wanted to point at this bit, because one of the main things she said is it was that the majority were not. She said on Saturday we saw that the vast majority were not young people of Generation Z. There were some young people, but most were not young. And we did see an interview, even a lot of young people that were there not to cause disturbances, but because they see no hope with Mexico or the government or them continuing to.
But
live there.
I could also see how she would make a statement like that.
Well, yes, of
There was
course.
young people there, but there was a ton of middle-aged and older people and families. It was really a mix of everybody. It was left, right. So she wants to kind of pigeonhole it as, oh, it's right-wing people that are older. That's not the case. It was a mix of everybody. We did interviews. We were there on the ground. Also, the people that were in the march were not the people sparking the violence at the end.
Yep.
Those people at the end look like they were coordinated to be there by somebody else.
And unfortunately, the riot police that Claudia Sheinbaum, when she was mayor of Mexico City, said that had disappeared and they were not going to have any riot police anymore in Mexico to keep the city peaceful. Well, now all of a sudden there was a bunch of riot police that were, unfortunately, because of the violence, be it from whoever it came from, they did start hunting down and also mistreating a lot of the protesters that were wearing white and were just standing there. So in that sense, bad on the police. But let's continue. We were talking about China, so let's start talking about what China's military is doing.
Yeah, but I will say one last thing to kind of conclude it.
Sure.
Scheinbaum's best strategy at this point in time is not to bring online censorship and start to really crack down on political opponents because of this event. If she does that, it's going to make it look like she was responsible for the violence and she coordinated that with bad state actors.
And again, she has signaled and pointed at and targeted influencers or creators that talk against the government. And I think that is wrong. But
She hasn't outright
all of the
censored
people,
them.
as she has tried to do before with certain people that are critical of her and her government, or journalists that have come out as critical of the government, or other people within the government. They have faced consequences, but if we see the consolidated effort with the telecommunications law and the other laws that they are trying to pass, and with the biometric
Well, and then they come
ID,
down with an iron fist with those things, because a lot of places have laws and they never really started prosecuting on those laws until recently. And now they've really gone overboard, and these Western governments are looking like authoritarian governments. If she can hold back from doing that, I think she's going to win a lot of support from a lot of people, actually, because Mexico will be one of the few countries that isn't implementing that. That being said, I think
yes, but they're also not battling
one
against
minute.
them.
I think within the next
Cartels.
30 days, we're going to really see an implementation of those kind of laws in Mexico.
Like the laws in China. From Visioner, Chinese military ships entered Japan's territorial waters. Chinese military ships entered Japan's, and we talked about the dispute that was going on and how Japan's new prime minister, who is far more towards the right, was speaking and going against China, very different to what the previous prime minister had been saying. But now Chinese military ships entered Japan's disputed territorial waters on Sunday morning and passed near the Senkaku Islands. The incident occurred amid deteriorating relations between the countries following statements by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi about the possible use of force in the event of a conflict over Taiwan. So this is all regarding Taiwan. The Japanese side recorded the presence of at least 4 armed China
Okay, so
Coast Guard ships,
we don't
reported
need to-
in a Bloomberg article.
we don't need to play the video. It's just a bunch of ships.
Yes.
It was kind of more just to read that. That being said, China has been infringing on Taiwanese air and water space for years now with jet fighters, ships, battleships, everything you can imagine. And now they're infringing on Japanese airspace and water space. They're really trying to throw their weight around. The countries over there are either going to have to stand up for themselves or kind of align with the Chinese. But now is the time that they're going to have to kind of make that decision. I think Japan's already made that decision. That being said, I've been doing a lot more research into the Japanese prime minister. I like her because she's so conservative and she's very strong, especially for a female candidate. That being said, she doesn't have a strong grip on power. Her support base is really fractured, and the only way she was able to get in power is because she was kind of the heir apparent to somebody else that was popular in Japanese politics. But a lot of her power base is actually fractured, so I don't know how long she's going to be able to actually hold power and actually implement what she wants when it comes to wartime strategy or non-wartime strategy.
Yes, and this was reported in a Bloomberg article, which presents the position of the Chinese authorities and, of course, diplomatic dispute. And China has been kind of licking their wounds because of the disputes with the U.S. and then being kicked out of a lot of Latin America as well, or getting a lot of tariffs imposed that they didn't have previously because of also the Trump tariffs. So they're in a weird, weak spot, but they're also trying to show force around now their territory more because they left it a little bit abandoned during the disputes elsewhere in the world, and now they're kind of going back to it.
Well, the strange thing is we reported on our last episode that there was American spy planes interfering with Chinese airspace and the Chinese were threatening the Americans. But China's doing that to every single country around them, and none of those countries are big enough to actually do it back to China except for the US. So this is a lot of like micro or meta power play moves that are being played in the region right now. America only has to really worry about Canada, Mexico. There's so many countries surrounding China and so many power plays going on there, whether it's with trade, tariffs, or militarily.
Yes, and hold on. I'm trying to get to the chat and I don't know where I left the windows. Here it is. Walker. Hi, Walker. Walker.
So I guess that wasn't Walker.
No, that wasn't Walker. Psychic, someone different, I guess. Walker says, does the Catholic Church care about the Christians in Syria, Azerbaijan, or Nigeria? Nah, they care more about Palestine and trans activists, both enemies of the Catholic Church. And again, it is that global power play and that infiltration of the churches, not just the Catholic Church, by ideology and by specific ideological currents that have taken a hold of all the other institutions that they are now losing, at least in the US. So now they're turning even more towards the church.
Well, and even if Trump doesn't do anything, he's pointing out the genocide of Christians in Africa, and that really shines a spotlight on that. And that's the opposite of what the hierarchy of the Catholic Church really wants to spotlight. So even if Trump's not going to do anything, the fact that he just gave lip service to that a couple of weeks ago is really making a lot of the world paying attention. Content creators pay attention, and it's really showing the division between actual Catholics and the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, like the popes, like the cardinals. A lot of these people are globalists and just are not aligned with the actual Catholic base, much like how the EU politicians aren't aligned with the people in their country, and they're putting globalist agendas before their own citizens.
Yes. And I have another story I'll quickly mention just because it is interesting given the conference we did go to this past Saturday as well that made us leave the protest early and also miss the pepper spray, luckily. Although I would have liked to film and be there and interview people while all this was going on. But we did see the fracturing also, and we continue to...
Why don't you tell them the name of the conference, where we were at?
So the conference, because I feel like people already saw the Saturday one, but the conference we went to was Eduardo Verastegui's Cumbre Viva Mexico, which was a replacement to CPAC that was supposed to happen this past weekend as well here in Mexico City. But because Eduardo Verastegui criticized Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, he was quickly withdrawn from being the leader of CPAC in Mexico.
They canceled CPAC based upon Milei canceling. And Milei's trying to get Verastegui canceled. And we can talk about this, but it was very interesting what happened because it was a very good conference with a lot of inspirational speakers. And it was really leading up and leading to this crescendo moment where Verastegui could have planted his flag in the ground and really said real conservatism is here in Mexico, except for the fact that he absolutely shit the bed, did the opposite of what he should do, didn't call out Milei, didn't fight for himself or Mexico, and then on top of that, what was the other thing?
And he very weakly just mentioned his opposition to the current government, but he also did not mention the protest that was happening right as he was giving his speech. And we were seeing the images as we were sitting there on our X feeds and all of the video of the protest happening and the violence that was starting to happen. And he did it, but he barely mentioned it. He was reading off of an iPad.
It was a canned script he wrote a week ago, and he was looking at his iPad every 2 seconds. And at the end of his speech, when he kept saying, "Viva Mexico, Viva this, Viva that," every time he would have to look down at his iPad to say what he was supposed to say. Then he would say, "Viva," then look at his iPad, then "Viva." It was ridiculous. This was a canned speech that had nothing to do with the politics of the day, and he looked like he's definitely not the man to be with the
Yes,
next
and
election.
even from the past CPEC we went to, kind of when our whole Spanish channel started, we did mention that, and I mentioned, Verástegui did not look like the sufficient leader to actually lead a right-wing conservative movement in Mexico.
And
This just confirmed it. What was interesting was that a lot of the other speakers, a lot of the specifically Argentinian speakers, I will mention by name El Presto, for example, if you know who that is, they went hard against Milei, and Milei has clearly lost a lot of the base and the people that helped him get elected in the first place. Very similar to what happened with Trump. And with him moving away from being Argentina first in a way, or with the ideals that got him elected. That was interesting to see. But this past Sunday, we also just saw, well, did you want to say something first before I go?
Yeah, I would say all these Argentinians that came up that were real populist and really had the heart of the people kind of fought the battle for Verástegui. And then when it was Verastegui's turn to get on stage, he's just like, oh, they fought my battle for me, so I'm just going to be this in the guardrails politician, not really spout anything that
He really wants to be a politician and not a leader, and that is the problem.
that's
That's
the
the problem
problem.
in Mexico. We just have people that want to be politicians but not leaders, and they just want the power but they don't want the responsibility that comes with leading people. What I was going to say is that we do see this fracturing again in Argentina. And this past Sunday, we had the first round of elections in Chile. And I wanted to mention really quickly that it does seem like at least southern part of Latin America is starting on that trend towards the right, as we had predicted that might happen after the leftist dismay that has been left by the current governments of a lot of these countries. So from The Guardian, far-right candidate José Antonio Cast, favored to become Chile's next president after first round vote.
Okay, and I will kind of say this. We now see in El Salvador, where Walker's from, we now see in possibly Chile. Argentina, where we're seeing the emergence of the far right. The problem is there's this movement. What's the movement called again?
Here?
To connect all the far right movements within South America.
You're going to talk about that?
This is a bad idea.
The Hispanist movement.
This Hispanist movement.
Hispanism movement. I don't know how to translate it into English, but yeah.
It's a bad idea because it's almost like global conservative for South America. You really want decentralized, smaller government and have everybody try different strategies to see what works, and whatever does work, the other parties in the other countries can implement what works and leave what doesn't. When you have one big movement that's like this big globalized South American movement, if things go wrong, the whole thing falls apart. Mm-hmm. And you really can't, like, each country has a different form of conservatism. It's not one big...
And different concerns as well.
Yeah, different concerns. It's not one homogenized movement. And when you try to put it in this homogenized thing, a square peg is not going to fit in a round hole.
So quickly, I'll just try to, from what I've learned, because again, I know less than I know more. I'm still learning about the context of this whole movement. Essentially, what it says is that countries that were not conquered, because they don't say the countries were conquered, which I mostly agree with, but countries that had influence from Spain coming into the country and sort of helping form governments, etc., and that were at one point led by the Spanish crown, should go back to the roots of Spain, and that's why the Hispanist, meaning Spanish speaking, but also all of the countries should unite in being proud of having been part of Spain at one point.
Yeah, but I will say this.
I've explained it really badly, but that
causes a natural divide. You want to have a big tent party, and even if people don't agree that the conquering of their country by Spain or whatever it is, some people aren't going to think that's a good thing. So don't have that as your dividing factor, because half the people are going to disagree with you. So, yeah.
And in part will disagree thanks to the influence from the left and the indigenous movement. But let's just finish putting this in context. Far-right candidate José Antonio Cast, just right-wing candidate José Antonio Cast, favored to become Chile's next president after first round vote. There's several layers of voting in Chile. The ultra-conservative lawyer is in pole position going into the second round election after running a campaign with a distinctly Trumpian feel. And again, that is interesting within the context of trying to change Latin America in general. The ultra-conservative lawyer, José Antonio Cast, is in pole position advancing to the second round of the South American country's presidential election, where he will face the Communist Party candidate Janet Jara, which is interesting. It is a far right or a right-wing candidate going against like the most communist party in Chile, called the Communist Party.
Well, and I think
more.
I definitely think you're gonna see the Americans come in with some big money here, because if they can get Argentina and now
Maybe,
Chile,
but I don't know if they like him too much because let's say he would not agree with Israel. With more than 70% of votes counted, Kast had secured about 24% of the vote in Sunday's first round vote, having campaigned on hardline promises to crack down on crime and immigration while making a Donald Trump-style pledge to put Chileans first, which again is what we say every country should be doing. It's not America first. It's not that if you agree with MAGA and you don't live in the US, you should be America first. You're your country first. I'm Mexico first. Jara won slightly more support, with about 26% of votes going to the former labor ministers for Chile's outgoing center-left president, Gabriel Boric. He was pretty left. He implemented a bunch of very stupid policies that essentially just aligned with the progressive globalists. But other right-wing candidates took almost 30% of the votes. But now these other right-wing candidates will ally most likely with Kast, and it could help him secure a win during the second round.
yeah, and I will say this, that would be a huge shift, especially if they go after Venezuela and they put a new leader in there. That would be a huge shift on the continent. That being said, if they do put a new leader, it's going to be the Nobel Peace Prize winner, and she is a hardcore leftist.
Maria Corina Machado.
So-
Well, not hardcore leftists. That would be, I mean,
But,
Maduro.
but she's not,
Yeah.
she's very far left. She's not a Malay.
No, but again, people within Argentina and those that elected Milei are going against him
Yeah.
now. So everything.
It's not that they're going against him. It's they want to push him in the right direction, just like Trump's base is trying to push him in the right direction. He's been involved in quite a few scandals. We've brought him up on this channel. Even though he's been involved in those scandals, he's the best opportunity Argentina kind of has right now. And they simply want to push him back in the right direction.
And or maybe get a better candidate next time and throw your support behind them, because these people, the ones that spoke here at Cumbre Viva Mexico, but also others that have turned slightly away or fully away from Milei, do have that influence and do have that knowledge of how to get him elected in the first place.
Well, and you also have to realize Milei.
Here we don't even have that in Mexico.
You have to realize Milei was kind of an in-between candidate. What do I mean by that? He was a libertarian. So he could appeal to people on the left too. So it was easier to get him elected before you bring in a totally right-wing candidate, maybe. So.
And Psychic says, it's the age of info, have to be vigilant. I love Nat and Guy. How have you been? Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you too. Rafa says, doing great besides this crappy government. And Psychic says, yeah, at the end of the day, we're mestizos. So like the whole Hispanist movement. And then Walker has said a bunch of things. So let me try and read. Walker says, there's a YouTube channel called Justin Taylor. He's a retired Bradley captain from the U.S. Army. He regularly posts interesting videos, but he mentions how China is trying to contact U.S. soldiers. Thank you. He says these contacts have been with any military personnel of any level, including those who are retired. And it's funny because he has a video where he trolls the Chinese people who contacted him for that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things going on.
And he says, if you like military topics, I recommend the channel. Thank you for the recommendation. He says he's very funny when he talks about these topics.
Yeah, it's very interesting what's going on, because it used to be a hegemony where America was kind of policing the world, and then they would overstep a lot of unjust wars, whether it was Iraq 1, Iraq 2, Afghanistan. I mean, you can go on. But now it's more of a multipolar world, and the U.S. feels like North and South America is their sphere of influence. You're seeing China kind of overstep their bounds. Russia's going into Ukraine. Europe thinks that region's theirs. You're seeing Israel thinking they can start 7 wars, because there is no real bounds on this. We're trying to find what are these power players are trying to find the limits of their power. So it's very interesting what's kind of going on when it comes to strategic war right now. Also, I was watching a video today about possibly the Russians, who actually do have the most advanced missiles in the world, more advanced than the US, may have created another new missile, which would be a nuclear powered missile, which could actually go for literally weeks or months around the world, and they could steer it. It would be far more advanced than any other missile, and it would be nuclear powered. So that would be a huge leap in military technology. They haven't proven their work. They showed the launch. They said what it was, but I think they also don't want to prove their work because they don't want to tip their hat to what that technology necessarily is or how somebody else can recreate it.
Walker also says there isn't a single politician in El Salvador who proposes joining a Hispanic movement. I think they don't even know it exists here, and if it does, they simply are not interested. And he said, I think it's the same in the rest of Latin America. Unfortunately, a lot of people, at least here in Mexico, that I have talked to or that have mentioned stuff or that I have gotten comments from, do support it in a way, but I think that it's not going to help.
I think there's a grassroots movement maybe being funded by the Americans to get this.
I don't. I think it's more church aligned, if anything.
Yeah, and who do you think's working through the church?
The globalists.
Okay, let's continue to go.
Psychic says, that's true, guy. We needed Trump.
Oh, what was the comment?
That's true, guy. We needed Trump. I guess from how the U.S. got Trump. I don't know.
Well, yeah, Trump is definitely.
You were saying something.
He's an extremely necessary figure. Even if he goes astray, we needed him at the time for the stopgap. The world was headed in a direction that we weren't going to be able to come back from. Even if Trump fails in the second half of his term, what he's done so far was enough to give us time to find the next candidate or to keep hope alive that globalism and a one world government isn't going to kind of come in with this authoritarian digital rule and rule every aspect of our life.
But the danger is that Trump, with some of the friends and alignments he has made lately, it's dangerously close to wanting to do that by himself and implement that also.
Well, I also think Trump was
by himself.
Was tearing down this liberal global power structure, and that gave some breathing room and some freedom, but now we see him trying to build a power structure of his own. Mm-hmm. And anytime a power structure is built, it's going to start stripping freedoms from people. When Trump first came in and tried to destroy this liberal global order, he gave a lot of freedoms to the people because he did it off of the back of that, saying more freedoms. But now that he's kind of torn down a lot of that movement, he's trying to build one of his own, which he's going to have to start infringing on freedoms. We kind of see that when people speak against Israel in the United States, he's arresting them or deporting them, which is crazy. That's against what his founding principle.
It's a little bit exaggerated.
Founding principles were with freedom of speech.
I'm not getting into the Israel topic, otherwise we'll be here forever. But Rafa says Milei's sister has a lot of dirt on him.
Oh, no, without a doubt. And we've pointed that out. He funneled a lot of money to his sister, and he had the Bitcoin scandal as well. So he's becoming more and more of a corporatist the more he's building the power structure within the country.
And it was nice to see that there was opposition willing to speak up at a conference. Again, I've been trying to find full recorded videos of speeches because we only got bits and bobs here. But if I do, I'll try to play one in Spanish because it was, I mean, they went hard against Milei. And I think that is needed as part of the checks and balances as well. Even the supporters, even the people that helped you get there should be able to speak out against you if you're, straying from what you promised.
Well, and I also think we may need multiple waves of populism in order so we don't get this calcified power structure, whether it's from the left or the right. Yes. Trump's trying to build this new power structure, and maybe we need another movement to come in behind him and say, no, we need to secure freedoms. Okay.
Hold on. And Psychic just sent a bunch of fires and 100. But let's move towards the U.S. now. From Timcast News, Vivek Ramaswamy is reportedly facing unexpected resistance from within the MAGA movement in his bid for Ohio governor, with some openly hoping he loses due to his past remarks and background. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, Amy Acton is capitalizing on the schism, attacking Vivek for calling Ohioans lazy and mediocre, trying to position herself as a governor who will address the cost and effort issues on day one.
And she's currently leading in the polls. And Vivek Ramaswamy, I would say he's more of a corporatist in the Trump movement, but he's still very, very good, much better than her. The fact that he looks like he's going to lose this election, he should have been an absolute shoo-in. And this is becoming a real problem. They're going to have to realign their base, and the only way the base is going to realign is if Trump gets back to the promises he made and stops going to becoming more and more of a global shill, listening to Susie Wilds.
But also, if they don't repair the schism happening right now within the MAGAs, the America Firsts, the conservatives, the Republicans, the right wing within the US, all of those I'm mentioning as different aspects of it because that's what they've kind of floated up to be, then the midterms are gone. And I think people need to focus in the States, and the commentary sector and the podcasters and the independent journalists have to focus more on the actual issues and less on the infighting, because that isn't helping them at all.
It's not, but you as a commentator, you don't want to be a shill, so you're going to point the shit out when you see it.
Yes, but again, if you only focus on that, then you're also not doing a disservice to
I'll say this.
giving commentary and information and doing journalism.
If he loses the midterms, that's going to freeze out. If he loses it where he doesn't have enough votes in the House or the Senate, that's going to freeze him out for the second half of his administration. He's going to look like a failed president at that point. The tariffs will probably be taken away. A lot of the policies he's implemented are going to stay frozen, only implemented through executive order and never really put through to hard law with a vote through the House and the Senate. And that's going to make the election in 2028 really, really hard. I would say maybe a Steve Bannon, but Steve Bannon was implicated heavy within the Epstein files. And Trump had a lot of embarrassing things come out.
We'll talk
on
about
the
that in a bit.
Epstein files.
But again, a house divided cannot stand, and they do need to figure it out. And I do have to agree with the Quartering and Tim Pool today. They talked about this schism and the focusing on petty gossip instead of actually and hurting people's lives in the process, instead of actually focusing on the midterms, which they should have been talking. Everybody should be talking about those issues and SNAP and all of the other things that are going on before they start with their Israel derangement syndrome.
But I will put this out there: if everybody just votes for Trump and he's becoming a corporatist and there's no correction in his,
I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about the others.
The other people, yeah. If everybody just votes for these rhinos that are running in these positions, and they just vote for them, then they're going to assume that that's going to happen in 2028, and there will not be a second wave of populist change to really secure the people's freedoms.
Yes, I'm not saying don't talk about it, but focusing on the infighting between different podcasters or different political commentators does not help in the long run.
Okay.
And I agree with Timple and Jeremy on that.
I think there's a lot of things coming up and a lot of scandals coming up within the conservative movement, and it's causing a problem because it's easy to talk about those issues.
Yes.
And there's not a lot coming about the Democrats right now.
Because a lot of the stuff came out already.
Yeah.
But people forgot about it.
Yeah, but
Just
if you keep bringing up really old shit when there's brand new shit, it looks like you're intentionally trying to look away from what's going on right now.
True. But I'm sure things will come up for the Democrats
whatever
as well,
happens,
with
it's
the
gonna be-
email drop, of the Epstein email drop.
Whatever happens, it's going to be very interesting, and I'll be a lot happier that I'm living in Mexico right now rather than maybe the United States, because if Trump loses or the conservatives lose in 2028 and in the midterms, it's not going to look good for the U.S. at all. The liberals are going to try to make up for lost time, and they are going to take away the filibuster and implement Puerto Rico as a state, Washington, D.C. as a state, and it will be very hard to beat them in future elections.
Yes. And just quickly, hold on. Rafa
I'm
said,
going to pill the dog real quick. You can keep going, though.
okay. Our dog has to take medicine for her back issues. I think I've mentioned before, she has problems with her spine, but they also help keep her calm. And right now she's trying to tear our studio apart, so we just don't want her chewing on a cable. Rafa says, do you know anything about the beef between Milei's vice president and him? I'd be lying if I said I did, but
a lot of people at the conference.
a lot of people at the conference were mentioning things in that similar vein. Hold on. Okay, I'll look into it and get back to you. But again, that rift within at least the people that helped get him elected and that helped build the movement up, they are mostly moving away. Agustin Laje, I think, is still a question mark. I have seen some remarks that are not as positive, but he has also not fully come out like these others have. So again, it was remember their names. I know El Presto and then I think. I'll try to find the names of the ones that spoke against it and the speeches, because I'd love to go over them as well during a live or as a reaction. But if everything continues to fracture, then if I lost my train of thought.
Good job. It happens to me. I freeze when she just leaves in the
When he
middle.
comes back.
I tend to freeze up.
But when he comes back, I lost my train of thought. But what I was going to say is, if things continue to fracture in the U.S., something that made like MAGA and America First and Trump very powerful was how united they were against the threats that were coming from the other side and globally, internationally. Right now, the AfD in Germany is getting those same threats from within, so that it will help them continue to, grow and become more powerful.
And let's just remind the audience, the AfD is the main opposition party in Germany. They are gaining a ton of support, number one. But number two, the EU and other German political parties absolutely hate them. So they've debanked them, their politicians, and their party, which is a complete overreach of power.
And now from Disclosed TV, Germany's AfD chief Alice Weidel, the planned EU-wide chat control is an absolutely totalitarian project. It means the de facto abolition of digital privacy. Mexico, listen up. And we'll just play it.
Am 14. Oktober wird der EU-Rat über die
Oh, it's in German.
Is it all in German?
Yeah.
Or does the translation kick
Why don't
in?
you play it and see?
I think I heard it in
Verordnung zur Prävention. Verordnung verbirgt
Yeah,
sich.
no, it's all in German,
But it's
which
good.
I don't speak yet.
But what is good here is there is a political party actually
Let me try to
speaking
find
up
it.
against censorship in the EU. So hopefully other countries are kind of paying attention to this, because these are important issues to the population itself. And even though I hate Claudia Sheinbaum and I don't like her, she might want to listen up, because she might actually get a lot of support from a lot of people if she doesn't implement censorship.
But she
And I
already
know
has those. She already has those.
the
on
laws
the
are there,
table.
but she's not implementing them yet, like these other countries have.
Not in the same way, but again, it's already essentially.
She's not debanking her political opponents yet. She's not banning people from the internet yet. So
Kind of. She's going after businessmen that are against her, like Ricardo Salinas Pliego, the owner of TV Azteca, and like a news network.
yeah, she's not.
And a bunch of other-
She's not imprisoning 12,000 people like the UK government is
she didn't.
in the UK.
But she is going after him via taxes and tax evasion and putting in a bunch of bogus charges, but then speaking about him openly at her morning conference.
Yeah.
Again, it's like the tropical version of censorship. Now going to France. From Marinov, France, and again, since this is another type of censorship, France fines TV channel €60,000 for saying immigration kills on air. Two guests said immigration kills on CN News. The host didn't argue, so the government did. France's media regulator fined the station €60,000 for failing to push back during the debate. And the free speech in 2025 is say something unpopular and pay the price, in this case, literally, from Visgard 24.
Yeah, so this is a very specific sentence. They're trying to put exacting guardrails on speech in the EU right now. They want you to know what you can and can't say and how they're going to punish you. They'll throw you in jail, give you $60,000 fines, not just you, but corporations as well. So they want to make sure corporations are in line with government rhetoric.
That was it. But now moving on to one of the bigger topics of today, and we're running a little late.
We'll
because
just
we
finish with this,
debated
and
a lot.
I'll give a brief overview, because this was a big day when it came to the
Do you
Epstein
want me to
files.
read it really quickly and then?
Yeah.
So right now, from the BBC, but there's a bunch of stuff that came before that Guy will explain. Trump calls on House Republicans to vote to release Epstein files. U.S. President Trump has urged lawmakers in his own party to vote to release files relating to the late convicted disgusting offender Jeffrey Epstein. Trump wrote on Sunday night that Republicans in the House of Representatives should do so because we have nothing to hide. It's a striking reversal for Trump after weeks of saying the clamor for a vote on the release was a Democratic-driven distraction.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a reversal. He went after the most popular politicians in his party, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like Thomas Massey. These are people that have no big corporate funders and that are completely funded by small donations, less than $100 from their own community. These were the MAGA, the real original MAGA candidates, even though I don't like some of their things that the individual politicians have said. Overall, they have been massive supporters of Trump, and Trump was really against releasing these Epstein files, and it's not looking good, because they did release a trove of Epstein files today, 10,000 emails, and there's multiple other troves. potentially to come. Trump needs to keep with the line of just release everything. He's been implicated in some very, very strange ways today. I'll talk about the 2 incidents. Maybe you can bring up the next one, because I think it is
Yes.
an article.
So from Wally Rashid, Jeffrey Epstein asked his brother, Mark Epstein, whether Putin has photos of Trump blowing Baba, which is Bill Clinton's nickname, allegedly.
So yeah, this would make a lot of sense if this actually did happen. It's not confirmed. It's just an email that was released. Trump was all over these emails, but he had no direct contact. He had actually removed himself from the group. The problem is Steve Bannon was talking to everybody within the group about Trump, and Steve Bannon was running Trump's campaign in 2016 when a lot of these emails were released. Very interesting. The rumor is that they have him on film actually blowing Bill Clinton. Now, is that true or is that false? I don't know.
And what does blowing mean? I still have that question.
But
in my head.
there was also another implication of Trump. The other big thing that was in there with Trump was with Trump and MBS. MBS is the king of Saudi Arabia. The thing about this is MBS is scheduled to be in Washington with Trump tomorrow. And what the email shows is MBS had a piece of art that was worth $15 million that he bought for $15 million. Trump bought that off of him for $450 million. Basically a pay-to-play scandal. If you want access to the administration and other things, that politicians are overpaying for pieces of art in order to get access to other politicians, or possibly a form of bribery. We see Hunter Biden involved in these art scandals. We also seen George Bush Jr. and become an artist after, and also selling his art for multi-million dollars. So this was common in these email threads. We didn't see a lot about underage girls, but what we did see was a lot of dirty dealings between politicians and how to blackmail politicians openly in these email threads.
But again, are we surprised about it? I mean, we know businessmen essentially do deals also over art. It's not like a big secret that the art
It's not just Trump, it's not just Trump in there.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is this could be a warning. They could have released this trove to say, we have the dirt, because there are multiple other troves that need to be released. This just came from one case that they had these 10,000 emails.
Do you want me to read what it said?
You can read if you want.
Again, this is all alleged. But so Mark L. Epstein says, wait, they start from the bottom and go to the top, or start from the top and go to the bottom?
I don't know.
So March 21st at 4 a.m. Okay, hold on. So it says a while back, so Mark L. Epstein, the brother, says, how are you doing? A while back, you mentioned that you were pre-diabetic. Has anything changed with that? What is your boy Donald up to now? And then all good, Bannon with me, says Jeffrey Epstein. Then Epstein says, Mark, the brother, says, ask him if Putin has photos of Trump blowing Baba. Again, what does blowing mean?
And Bubba was Bill Clinton and all these email threads. All these people had nicknames. Donald Trump was Donnie T. Steve Bannon was Stevie B. So, actually, Epstein's brother came out and said, Bubba, in this one email didn't mean Bill Clinton, but in every other email it did, which just looks absolutely strange. What did come out of here was this is a group of really high elite individuals in these email threads, really colluding with each other in a lot of different ways. Also, what came to be was the former, is it president or prime minister of Israel? Was in direct contact with Epstein over a ton of situations. He was actually setting up meetings between the former prime minister of Israel and Putin and other world leaders. These email threads really make it look like Epstein was definitely a Mossad agent. The big question is, was he also working for other agencies like the CIA? And there's people are just now going through these emails. They're all on official government website right now. So people are downloading them, using AI to find out keywords, what individuals are in these emails. There's a lot of misspellings, so people are having to actually read through them because sometimes they're not able to actually find specific keywords because things were misspelled, they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to go in?
There's supposed to be another trove of 20,000 documents coming out. Now, the big thing is to watch on this is Trump will infer guilt if Pam Bondi comes out and said, we have an open case. We can't release any more Epstein files, because Trump has now come out and said, release everything. So he may privately tell Pam Bondi behind the scenes, you have to come out with a statement saying you can't release anything. If that happens and Pam Bondi says we can't release any more files because we have ongoing cases, it's going to be very concerning, especially with the rumors of Trump possibly giving Ghislaine Maxwell immunity that have emerged in the last few days. Okay.
Do you want to go into anything else? MTG? That's kind of connected? Or?
Yeah, let's go into the MTG, and then we'll call it a day just because you have your other show and a guest might be coming.
Maybe. So Rafa says, from Claudia Sheinbaum.
Shush bomb.
Yes. And Psychic says yes. And then Rafa says, remember that painting that Epstein had of Bubba dressed as a woman? There must be something really creepy about it.
Well, and
or connected to it.
Well, and you also have to be asking yourself, Donald Trump actually absolutely hates Hillary Clinton, but he's never going after her. And there seemed to
Well, I mean, he kind of did.
There was a lot of evidence that came out recently that he could have gone after her, and he didn't. Maybe it's Bubba's protecting her.
No,
And even if Bubba isn't Bill Clinton, I want to know who the frick Bubba is. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for Trump either way.
And what blowing means as well. Again, I think it might be keyword for something else. No. I don't know.
But this would make sense why Trump wasn't actually implicated in anything illegal, but it was extremely embarrassing, and that's why he didn't want the files released. This would actually make sense.
And because of this, he has been in a public spat with Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone that had been defending him and had been vying for him
His most
for a long time.
Avid defender was Marjorie Taylor Greene. When there was House votes going on the floor and Trump couldn't get the votes that he wanted, she was literally handing the phone to different Republicans so Trump could talk to him on the floor because they weren't answering his calls.
So in January 2023, during a contentious vote for Speaker, Trump kept calling members of the House and no one took his calls except one member, MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene. C-SPAN got footage of her trying to get members to talk to Trump. Today, Trump wants this goon to run against MTG because she wants wars to end, focus on America, and no 50-year mortgage debt traps, and releasing the Epstein files.
Yeah, and it was mainly the Epstein files because both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie took a hard line and said, if you vote against releasing the Epstein files, you're going to look guilty. We need to fracture from Trump on this particular vote and actually release the files, which I completely agree with. These files need to be released. Donald Trump did everything over the weekend to really put pressure on the Republicans to vote no on this. It looks like they shifted away from him, and now he's having to change his stance, and now he's trying to say, release everything. I will say this. I hope there is a lot of pressure put on Donald Trump about this Bubba situation. I hope this becomes his big mic. And maybe this is the only thing that's in the files. And he'll say to himself, I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm taking the ship down with me and actually release everything. Mm-hmm. Because only if Trump's embarrassed and all the dirt's already come out on him, are you going to see all the Epstein files released. And there is a chance, and I know a lot of people want to call it conspiracy, but there might be a second layer of these Epstein files, which is absolutely, that implicates the people that were accused in Pizzagate. And that might be the end of the stream after I said that word.
Yes. I didn't realize we were still on YouTube.
Oh, okay. That's all right.
We're still on YouTube. Okay, so that's it. Or do you want to go into any other of the stories we had?
We'll go over to RUMBELE just for 2 or 3 stories so we can kind of end over there like we usually do.
Okay, so YouTube, we'll see you tomorrow. No, we'll see you on Wednesday. Please do subscribe and follow us over now to RUMBLE for the rest of the stories.
Yeah.
That we'll do pretty quick.
Okay. Let me log out here.
I just rambled there at the end.